All right, so let's make a copy of this so that we can do our purchases. I'm sorry, this is the purchases, so we can do the used. In other words, the purchases add to inventory, and when we take things out of inventory, those are used. And so that is now going to be a separate tab that has many of the same features. So we go ahead and just take a copy. And I would actually normally delete all of the information here, but I'm just demonstrating that I can take a sheet that's already got some data in it and clear it out. So that's, well, I had to unprotect it before I could do that, of course, because some of the fields, particularly column B, is protected. So I'm just cleaning things up here a little bit, moving stuff around just for some variety. That's all this is. And I suggest you do that on an exam. If you do several inventory sheets, then make sure that even after you copy things that you modify things a little bit just so that you get different balances and quantities, etc. Although you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you do that. So there we are, some different dates, and oops, yeah, well, I entered the date wrong and it checked it for me. So my data validation worked very well. All right. So all we want to do here now are change a few other things that make this the used tab. So just edit the date to be the date used and the quantity to be the quantity used. And we don't need the price, so we get rid of that. The price is at the price we purchase it. Obviously, we don't use materials within the organization at different prices. And I'm just tweaking the quantities so that my quantity purchased is larger than my quantity used. And that's a good thing. So now let's move over to the inventory summary sheet where we're going to finish it off. Notice we have the ID numbers here. I'm going to take a copy of the first heading. Remember, I took a copy of that when I created the other sheet. So this is identical in all situations, and that's very important. You will find if you do not have the heading identical, that what we're going to do now will not work. All right, it's matching, and if I drag it down as a title with the value, the title keeps going down and the values change. And there I have a criteria list that matches the unit IDs that I have. So we're going to highlight that. Eventually that column will be hidden, but for now, we're just going to make sure that it looks reasonably attractive. So there we are. A little more formatting, column width here, and we're ready to begin the next process. So how do we find the items? Because you can purchase items multiple times. So it's not like a lookup where there's one thing. Instead, it's a database, and we use the dsum function. dsum is one of the database. D is for database. So a sum function within a database. What's our database? Well, in this case, we're starting with purchases. And it is the entire area here from A to E. And I locked it, F4, to lock that data field, no matter where I copy my formula, although I won't copy it a lot. I don't want that changing. And then the next part is the field. In other words, where am I looking within the database for the values I want? And here's quantity purchased. And again, I'm copying it to keep it identical to what's in the table array or the database. All right, one last piece is the criteria, and that, of course, is what we set up over in column I. And this time, because it's item 10, we want where item ID is 10. So that gives us 9. Now that is not including our, that just includes our purchases. We have 2 and we have 7, that equals 9. So that's our purchases, but that's not our quantity in stock because, of course, we have items that have been used. So we need to take this whole thing and copy it, and then we're going to subtract the used. Well, we can do that. We'll paste the entire thing we copied and modify it so that it accesses our used database with the same criteria. So dsum for purchases minus the dsum for used. That was purchased on that side. So let's just change the word, because all that's different in terms of our name of our table and our name of everything else is that it's a different tab, and the tab's name is used. So we're changing the tab names in the references from purchase to used. Now when we hit enter, our value is different. It's 8. Well, that's what happens when we subtract everything in the purchased from everything in the used for 10. Now I'm going to copy way down. This is a speed shortcut. This is not an official thing. See what happens when I copy down? It only moves one cell at a time, and that means we get things out of order. But the next one is correct. So if you go down 2, you get the correct one for the column above it. So all I'm going to do is, I copied it down, so I'm going to get rid of the ones that are not correct. And typically it's going to be every second one as I move down. I just right click and delete them. This is interesting because it's a 0, but if we check it, it looks right. It is item ID and then the 12. Chances are that that's just a matter of the actual value. In fact, if we go take a peek at it, we'll find that it's because we haven't bought any and we haven't used any. Anyway, so we're going to keep going here. Scissors, there's one pair of scissors in stock. If I delete the bad formula here, it moves up. The correct formula moves up, and sure enough, that is item ID 14, which is staplers. Now one more, and we have our complete list. And trust me, this is much quicker than trying to do the process any other way. All right, so then there's this thing called value. Well, what do we mean? Well, what we are trying to do here now is a little bit different. In fact, let's not get value first. Let's begin with something else, because ultimately to get the actual value of things, we need to know the cost or the price. So we bought things at different prices. Well, what price do we use if we've bought reams at different prices? Well, our accounting method is going to be to use the maximum price to estimate our value. So we're going to go find the maximum price. How do we get that? Well, it's another database function. In this case, it's called DMax. And let's use the function helper here. Haven't used it before. Actually, I have, but you don't know that. So we're going to, in the menu thing, we're going to type in something meaningful. And you can see what I'm writing there is the maximum of a database. So in the list, you'll see that DMax comes up and the description fits what we're looking for. So we click OK and bring it up. All right, so let's find out the maximum price for purchased items. In this case, the first one is going to be the copy paper. So let's take a look at our database again, and here we are back at purchased. That's our database, and it needs to be locked. $signs in front of every one of the values. And then we go and try to find the field. Where is it going to be? Well, that is going to be also in the purchased, but this time we want the price per unit. And again, I could type it in quotes, but I'm going to just select it from the cell. You see to the right that it says price per unit. Now, as far as the criterion, again, we can use the same criterion because things haven't changed. Under unit ID in the database, I want to find 10. That's for that row. And I click OK, and sure enough, that is my price for the maximum price. If I had several prices, then it would give the maximum. In this case, it's only one. And again, I can repeat the process of copying down, and you'll see that every second one is wrong because you have to move 2. You have to move every 2 to get the right formula. So think about that. If you figure that out, you will become well on your way to being a power user in Excel because of the speed with which you'll be able to accomplish things simply because of your understanding. So here we go. Go ahead and check that. Yes, that one's got to be taken out of there. And we're near the bottom, and that one is correct. So what's left below here were extras, and now we can just clear them because there's nothing to be moved up. When you do delete, that nicely moves the next one into place. So now that we have our quantity in stock and our price, we're done with database functions. So we hide our criteria in column I, and we begin the formula that is simply our quantity of that item times the maximum price that was brought over from purchases, and we can just copy that down. And we have essentially completed our summary page. 7 items, 345, and there's our total. Sure enough, here we are. I added this after I was on the screen. Let's add one here so that we have boxes of file folders that have been used. I'm using today, and just use one. And now if we go back, active, immediately you'll notice we go from 2 in our quantity to 1, which reduces our overall value. That's valuable. That means that as it happens, that things will change automatically. Okay, so just a little bit more formatting here. Oh, that was ugly. Let's try something pretty. That's a little bit better. But blue will match what I did up above, right? So we do that, maybe play around with this font color, bolding, and of course we can change the size. All of this just to make it a little bit more attractive, to provide a drawing of attention to what's important, and of course to make it clear what's going on. Just remember our 4 items, A, and C. The accuracy, of course, is all about the formulas. So let's try one more time to play around and make this fit well and not be over the top. I like that. So last but not least, we put a border and make it just a little bit fine-tuned. That row didn't need to be that large, and that should be it. So let's save that, and we now need to move on to our next step. So it's saved, and now we can close. All right, so let's transition now to what we do once the file is closed. Here's our file on the desktop. We need to do a number of things with a file folder. So let's create a folder, and our folder now has a name that makes sense in terms of the inventory management VLookup inventory. We'll take our file that's been saved and closed, and we put it inside of the folder, and then we open the folder. Now this is just the one demo. Let's rename that to VLookup, and remember we need several different places that we're tracking our supplies. It's not just one location. So this is for the first location, and let's see here, There we go, store U, and this is number 1. Now, I have an entire file here. It's got the summary, the purchased, and the used all set up, so there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So let's just take a copy of this, and we can, if we use paste, we can do this multiple times. How many do we need? Well, I'll show you with 3, and eventually we'll need 4. But the fact is that having made copies, you'll notice that we need to rename them like we do other things. Take away copy and change that to 2. And then let's see, the top one. So rename that, and this is going to be store U3. And we'll need a store U4, but that takes care of the example for you. So store U4. All 4 of these we select, we right click, and we choose open. I want them all open at the same time. It's just easier in terms of being able to access them, because what we're going to do is create a dashboard that will access all of these files. I'm not going to try and get them all on the screen for you. It's busy enough as it is. But having found one of them to work with, let's go ahead and minimize the rest until we can focus on the one that we want. All right, so here we have a copy, one of the items. It's got purchases and used and inventory. We just need a copy of this. We're going to create a copy in a new book. Notice the book changes, and we create a copy, and it's going to take a copy out of one of the individual store units, and this now becomes a new workbook. This is similar to what you need to do for your exam, right? That should look familiar from the exam, how-to exam video. All right, so save as. This is a brand new book, and we're going to browse, and in our case we're going to work with it. Let's see, yeah, recent places is a really good place to check for where you put the folder that you had things in. There it is, there's our fake U folder and the others there. I clicked on one of the other files just to get most of the name typed out, and I modify it now to say dashboard. So be careful to change the name so you don't write over top of the other files that were there. So we now have our dashboard. So let's call it a dashboard. Let's go up in the title here and remove the word management and replace it with the word dashboard. And once we have dashboard properly typed and entered, let's go and see what else we can change. These all fit. We need to track them. We'll keep the item descriptions, but we aren't at this point in this project going to track price or estimated value. So let's highlight those and eliminate them. We will need other columns, so we're not going to deal with the top title being the right size yet. Instead, what we need is our quantity in stock for all of the different subunits. So store U1 is our first of the 4, and let's make this the right size to fit that. We can play around again with size later, but anyway, now notice this is still the formula, and it looks over in the other file, store U1 file, which we'll come back to that, but we're not doing dsum anymore. This is all going to have to go away, and we're going to replace it with a proper formula, which in this case, we're not doing any calculation. We're simply going to go look up for all of these items in store U where they've already been calculated. So let's get started with another function. Here it is, equal, and then as I type, it comes up to VLookup and gives me the prompt. This is going to be looking up item ID 10. So we click on that, and where is it at? Where is the table array? Well, the table array is in an entirely other file. It's in the store U file, and we have here the summary page, and on that summary page for store U1, we're going to select the items. Again, not the titles, just the items. We prefer that they be in order. And all we need is quantity and stock. Remember, we got rid of price and value. So just quantity and stock for those items at that location. Now, that is a big, long thing saying where the computer is going to find it. It has the dollar signs to say, don't look anywhere else. Don't change this if I copy it. And then I'm going to press the comma, and remember it's a column index, so we had 3 columns, and what we need is in the 3rd column. So we enter that. We make sure that we tell it we want an absolute or an exact match. That's false. And we have our first one. And sure enough, if we want to peek behind here, we have the other file, and if we check, the quantity in stock is 8. And so we properly brought that value. We looked it up in this file, in that sheet, and we brought it over to our other one. Let me move this so that we can see the other. Okay, so we're back in our summary sheet, our dashboard, and we have a correct formula. And because they're in the same order, we can just copy down, and sure enough, each of the references is going to look now in a different, same column, but just looking up a different value. So this one is looking up 11. The 3 is correct, so all of them are correct. Let's take and copy this now because we have 4 other stores. Yeah, it'll take a little work, but we're almost there. We just have to format these so that everything fits. You'll see the top did right. It did change it to U2, and the others will be correct. But now we've got a problem. Why did it shift to B? Our lookup is wrong. Well, if you come back here, you'll notice we didn't lock anything in that column. And our ID numbers are only in column A. So let's put a dollar sign saying don't change the A. Let's copy that down. So this is now saying the part we look up has to be in column A, even for the last item. So there you are, $A is kept the same. So let's take this. Now we don't need to copy the top anymore. Let's just copy across these. And now look at that. Even though we copied across and down, we have the right value because the A was locked, but the row was not. So it changed the row, but did not change the column. Well, now we have everything for store U1, but we want in column 2 to have store U2. So all we actually have to change is the name of the file. Everything else is identical. Remember, we copied it. So there we are, and that's U2. And if you look down, you'll see all of them now are looking at U2. Now, because I didn't change any values in anything, it looks identical still. But if you look, sure enough, the values for the quantity are the same. Well, yes, that's still 1. Let's move over just a little more. There we go. So now we see U2 has the same amounts. To prove that we're doing this right, let's go into the location, go to used, and let's spend something, or I mean use something up. So we want to go to the next column here, and I don't know, what did they use? Just select tape dispensers. Sure, they used a tape dispenser today, and of course they only used 1, but 1 used will mean the inventory summary for store U2 no longer has any tape dispensers. It's out of tape dispensers. So I'm going to go up where you can't see and change back. I'm now back in the dashboard, and immediately, look at this. The tape dispenser quantity for store U has changed. It's now 0. So that's where we're at with that. Now let's go to this one. And again, we just changed the file name to 3, store U3. You can see the value of maintaining similar names and identical locations. And this one is 4, so store U4, same locations, same values, and of course looking up the same reference one. And there we have. Let's auto size. That didn't work. Oh well. In the meantime, let's find our column left over with the criteria we don't use here. Delete that. And now let's go back and uniformly size all of our stores to something reasonable. Fix our title now. Make it match or span across the entire area. And do a few more things with borders. I'd like that to be more attractive and a nice heavy border around the whole thing. But there's one more important thing that we need to do. We've got a bunch of numbers here, and I'd like that 0 to stand out to let me know that something's totally out of stock. So under conditional formatting, we can choose to color code based on certain values. So in this case, if it's less than 2 in stock in a location, I want it to be highlighted a light red fill with a dark red font. And sure enough, if I move that out of the way and I click OK, you can see already that it's highlighting all those lower numbers. If I had a real situation, I wouldn't have quite so many pinks. But I also want to see, maybe there's somewhere I can move inventory from. So if I do a greater than, and I can say arbitrarily say a 7 here, that if it's high, then I want it lit up in green. And here we can do the various combinations, but green fill with dark green. And sure enough, all of them are there, and larger than 7 shows up that way. But we have one more thing to do. Close the file, save it, and then go back to the desktop where everything's in the folder, and right-click, choose Send to a compressed folder. Now you can't see it, it's off screen. Let me go get it and bring it on screen. In fact, let's bring it right over here. That is a completed file that you could submit for an exam.